So we'd like to kind of continue our story today, and again, try to stress that the point of the class is to really give us faith at the end of the day, and to in our minds sort of connect the stories that we get from the Bible to things that are relatable. And as human beings, I think one of the things that I relate to, maybe it's just because of my profession or whatever the case may be, are maps and in geography. So there's a lot of geography in this, but there's also a lot of lessons that we can't miss. Hopefully, we went back to this slide today to show the path, a potential path. No one actually knows exactly how it went, but this is the most likely path. And we see that Abram journeyed from Ur through Babylon and was in Haran. I think when we last heard about this, our character Abram, the protagonist, if you will. Does anybody remember how long of a journey that was? Pop quiz, pretty close. Anybody else? It was 600 miles from Ur to Haran. That's correct. And so from Haran to Canaan, it's another 500 miles. Imagine an 1,100-mile journey, walking or possibly on a horse or camel or a donkey. It's quite an undertaking. Really shows the faith of Abram. And as we pointed out last week, the scriptures are a little bit emphatic, moving to Haran. I'll just read it. It says, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran, and they dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So that's the end of Terah, and this move may have been actually motivated solely by terror. We don't know that for a fact, but it's interesting that the scriptures do tell us that thing. And then if we go to chapter 12 of Genesis, it starts out, it says, and now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, and go into a land that I will show thee. Notice it says, get out of your country, and leave your kindred and your father's house. And it's something that God wants us to pay attention to. I watched a pretty interesting sort of take on this, and maybe some of you guys watch this as well. There's a gentleman from Canada who is I think a doctor of psychology, Jordan Peterson. He recently gave a kind of a exposition on the travels of Abram, and it was interesting. His take on this is that Abraham was given an adventure, and he was given a specific thing to do, and so that's kind of how I want you guys to sort of look at this. Is he's going on an adventure. He's been sent out away from what's comfortable to him, away from what he knows. And he's given a task, and we'll see kind of what his task is later on. So at least for right now, we want to see that he's given a message to leave his house and go to where God is going to show him. And in verse 4, it says, Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And it's particular to point that out to us. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Okay, so he leaves when he's 75. And he goes in verse 6 of Genesis 12. It says, and Abram passed through the land into a place called Shechem, in the plain of Moriah, and the Canaanite was in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abraham, verse 7, and said to him, and to thy seed will I give this land. And he built it an altar to the Lord who appeared into him. So we have Shechem. Oh, let me see if I can find it's over here. Pointer. And I think I have to turn this on or something. Let's see. So he moves to Shechem after God had went to him. And once he gets to Shechem, he starts to get a message from God. He was told to leave, get away. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to give you something. And then when he gets there, he starts to begin to get a promise. And in Shechem is the first place he gets the promise. And he's simply told, from what we read in the scriptures, unto this seed will I give this land, and he built it an altar unto the Lord in Shechem. Okay. All right, so then we have, he moved from thence into a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel to the west, and Ai to the east, and there he built it an altar to the Lord, and he called upon the name of the Lord. Which is sort of interesting. It's like, did he not call upon the name of the Lord before? Or is his faith beginning to develop? Maybe these are questions that I asked myself when I looked at it. And this is an unnamed mountain. Thence into a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. And when I first looked at this, I was like, there is no mountain there. What is this talking about? What is this talking about? And so I kind of try to wrap my head around it. Bethel. What do we know about Bethel? Surely you guys know something about Bethel. Yes, very good, Joe. That's a very good answer. So it may have been an exact same spot, maybe not. Yes, sir. It did later became a place of idolatry. That's correct. Let's start a little. Let's go back just a little bit. Bethel, house of God, right? And Ai. I'll test you guys a little bit more. What is it? Oh, Joe. Where's the corner at? Yes. We have another answer.
As I recall, it's the city that they fought against after they took Jericho.
That is correct. What happened there?
They lost.
Yes. And why did they lose?
Yeah, because of the sin of Achan, right?
Because of the sin of Achan. And what was Achan's sin?
He coveted some of the garments and the silver and the gold.
That's right. He coveted. And idolatry. Ai means heap of ruin. God delivers our protagonist in between the house of God and a heap of ruin. Guess where you are? Guess where I am? We're between the house of God and heap of ruin. That's the two places we can go. Yes, sir.
I'm thinking it's also near where they had the mountain of blessing and the mountain of cursing.
Close, but not really. We'll get to that. That's in. We'll look at that later on in Moses' time. We're gonna skip through some of these and get a little bit better idea of geography. Again, so when he originally came into the land of Canaan, he resided in Shechem, and soon enough he was instructed to move to this mountain between Ai and Bethel, and he continued there for some time. Let me catch up with my scriptures here. Chapter 13, and again we're kind of both focusing on geography and hoping we can draw some lessons from it. Chapter 13, verse 3 and 4, if anybody's following along. And they went on, and he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, and to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. So if you go back at the very beginning of chapter 13, you'll find that he gets moved to Egypt for a short period of time because there's a famine in the land. And when he comes back, he goes back to the same place between Bethel and Ai. and to the place of the altar that he had made at the first, where Abraham called upon the name of the Lord. And then, and this has always been a little scary to me. I'm not really sure how to approach this. Hebrews tells us that Lot was a just man, but it was necessary for Abram and Lot to separate, because this continues in the story. There's always that little thread there. And in chapter 13, verse 14, and the Lord said unto Abraham, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now your eyes from the place where you are, look northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give it to you and to your seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then his seed shall also be numbered. And we know that seed is actually singular. Arise, walk through the land, the length of it and the breadth of it, and I will give it to you. So he got hints of the promise earlier, but if you look at the thread that kind of goes all the way through, he wasn't separated from his family at that time. And so not until he and Lot had separated was this promise expanded upon. And now we have the promise of the singular seed, which we recognize as Christ, and we have a better idea of the number of his seed, plenteous as the dust of the earth, and the biggest part of this promise is not that he's going to receive this land, and not that he's going to have these children and a singular child being Christ, but the biggest part of this promise is forever, right? David recognized the same language. He said, thou speakest of thy servant's household for a long time to come. So for you to inherit something forever means that you have to be there, right? So he began to explain to Abram what the implications of this promise are, and that he began to understand that for him to inherit that promise, that he would have to be there forever, right? So it's actually a promise of eternal life, which makes it more and more interesting as you continue along. So the next part of our journey will bring us to Hebron, and I know Brother Perry has spoke a lot on Hebron. I really am excited whenever I see. And I have to apologize. I don't have any weebles in my presentation, but Brother Perry has done a really good job in his expounding on Hebron, because I believe it's a really, really important place. Later in Genesis chapter 13, at the very end of the chapter, we see this. So if you'll follow me to the next place, which is Hebron, here. Of course, this just shows back and forth. I'm going to go through some of the, oh, there we go. What do you know? Verse 18, chapter 13. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is Hebron, and he built there an altar for the Lord. This is another turning place in Abram's life. He's been shown the extent of the promise that he's given, and then he moves to Hebron. Hebron, it means alliance or friendship. Abram becomes a friend of God because of his faith and his development of his faith. Wow. So I'm not seeing this particular slide. I had no idea that she came up with this on her own, but that's the same as my notes, although she didn't even know that. That's amazing. Okay. All right. chapter 15, verse 4. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be your heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And then in verse 18 of chapter 15, in the selfsame day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed I will give this land, from the river of Egypt and to the great river, the river Euphrates. So as he moves to Hebron, this promise is further expounded to him. His assumption had been, because he didn't have any children, he was already 99 years old, that he wasn't going to have any children. This seed must have been from Eleazar. That's what his assumption was. But God at this time says, no, it's going to be from your own bowels. You're going to have children even at this great age. And at this point, this is Sarah hears this, and when she laughed, she's like, I don't know, this is crazy. These angels, they don't know what they're talking about. But nevertheless, then it's expounded to him that he's going to have his own children. And then it's also further enumerated what this land grant was. Now, if he's up on this mountain we'll pass it up. Now, let me just go back there just for fun. If he's up on this mountain here or here, and he looks and sees as far as he can see, I wish there was a scale on here to give us a little bit better idea. But in truth, he can only see maybe, 10 miles on a really, really good day. So we do know that from Hebron that he could see Sodom and Gomorrah burning, which was probably in this area. But probably just the smoke. If you see a column of smoke up in the air. But I think the point of what I'm trying to say is that he probably couldn't see all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And he definitely couldn't see all the way to the Nile. And there's absolutely no way that he could see to the Euphrates, right? So God's, as they become friends, explained this promise to him a little bit better. I'm going to give it, but he knew where the Euphrates was. He'd grown up on the Euphrates, right? And he had crossed the river Nile, or at least probably seen the river Nile, when he went to the land of Goshen. And so God's saying, all this land, from the place that you were born, all the way down to this Egypt that I just brought you down to, this is your land grant. So he further expands it. And then in chapter 17, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be perfect. So he's instructing him how he should be. And then in verse 5 of the same chapter, he says, No more will you be called Abram, but you shall be named Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made you. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, will make nations, and kings come of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give it thee, and to thy seed after thee, in the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Friendship has its benefits, and this is what's promised to Abram. And this further expounding occurs again as he is in the area of Hebron. Genesis 18, verse 1, the Lord appeared unto him in the plain of Mamre, and he sat in the door in the heat of the day. And I'm going to advance this a little bit, and we're going to look at some of the other places. Give you guys to read over some of these notes of Hebron. If we recall in Brother Perry's class, Perry believes that Hebron is a likely place for those human inhabitants of the kingdom age to gather before, maybe even to stay, before they make their pilgrimage to Jerusalem, if you'll recall some of his classes, which seems to make a bit of sense to me. I wish he was here because he could put the scriptures together to show us exactly how he believes that to be the case. So we still have a couple places to go here from Hebron. So he's told to go through the land, to walk through the land, and to see the land of his inheritance. So as you notice, he doesn't just stay at one place. He's nomadic. He has herdsmen. We know that from the discussion with Lot. And we assume that they're maybe sort of like the modern day Bedouin. They lived in tents, and what was important to them was water. So they moved from place to place to be able to feed their animals and to be able to water their animals. And as part of this instruction, God tells him to move to Beersheba. Chapter 20, verse 1. Yes, sir. Yes, and we're going to look at that. That's very, very good. We're going to look at that. It becomes really important as the story of Abram and Isaac here in just a minute. So, yes, we're getting into that in just a second. So he's told to move to Beersheba, chapter 20, verse 1. And Abram journeyed from thence toward the south country and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur and sojourned in Gerar. And Gerar was actually one of the cities of the Philistines. And at that time, his herdsmen traveled as far as Beersheba. And the story goes that his herdsmen dug a well in Beersheba. And lo and behold, Abimelech's herdsmen found the well that he had dug. And there was a skirmish between the Philistines at this time and Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, and Abram. And it says that Abram reproved him and that he stressed to him that he had dug this well, and his herdsmen had dug this well and built this well. And so Beersheba actually means the city of seven wells is what it means. But as a token to Abimelech, Abram gives him 7 ewe lambs, is how the story progresses, as evidence that he dug this well, and this particular well in this area was part of his inheritance, and he was stressing that. So we know that he went to Gerar. And we're going to skip down to Genesis chapter 20, verse 31. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because they swear the both of them. And they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the captain of his host, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abram planted a grove in Beersheba, and there called upon the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abram sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. Yes, Joe.
So your cool journey that starts in Ur and goes up and then back down,
Yes.
right? His journey, I asked, because I love geology, to see how this marries up with the fault lines in the Middle East. His path actually doubles as the fault lines for the Middle East. So the Eurasian plate goes right through his path from Ur through Babylon up
It does.
and that's incredible. Then the next one is the Anatolia plate, which he also walked right along, and that's between what's modern day Turkey and Syria. And then coming down, it's the one that is the Dead Sea fault that goes all the way out to the Gulf of Aqaba. So it's just fascinating to me that his path is the split line between Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East.
Right.
It literally carves like a knife in the sand all the way around.
Yeah, we should probably comment on that. Actually, he didn't take the normal path.
No.
Either one of these aren't the normal path. There's the Highway of the Kings, which is actually on the other side of the Dead Sea, which was a pretty well-traveled path. And then there was the Highway of the Plains, which would have been along in the area of the Philistines. And that would have been probably the most reasonable ways to be able to journey in this thing. But God takes him down a mountain range. And he goes from peak to peak to peak, which just happens to be, as Brother Joe says, along the fault line in this region. So I said we were going to talk a little bit about distances. And so here we go. So as he's in Beersheba, Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abram, and said unto Abram, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee of. Back to another mountain. And it says the land of Moriah. It doesn't tell him the mountain of Moriah, but it says the land of Moriah, in a region of Moriah. And he's in Beersheba. It's 16 miles. By the way, he was 99. Isaac was born when he was 99 3/4 or 100 years old, right? Young man, old man. How old is he when he takes this journey with Isaac? How old is Isaac? And how do we know how old Isaac is? We're going to guess. He could be. He could be not 25, because we have another marker there at 25. But he's somewhere between. Well, we know this as a clue that Isaac was able to carry enough wood on his back up a hill to make a sacrifice, which is probably a considerable amount of wood. I don't know, at least 15, but maybe on up to 20. So again, back to age-wise, Abram is 120 years old. When he gets this message in chapter 22 here, he is going to go to the land of Moriah, and he is 120 years old, and he's on a donkey, it says. And Abram rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac, and clave the wood for a burnt offering, and rose up and went up to the place which God had told him of. And it said, Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. Gerar to Beersheba, 16 miles. Beersheba to Jerusalem, 57 miles rather. 80 miles. Did we realize that whenever God told him to take his son, his only son, and make a sacrifice, that he was going to go 80 miles away. And he's 120 years old. And after on the 3rd day when he rose up, he could see it afar off. So it was quite a journey, and you can imagine. But this is still continuing to develop his faith. Now he's told him, I'm going to give you a seed. And the seed's going to be of your own child. And even after Sarah laughed, he's given this child, and he begins to see these things take place. And then he's told, take your child, your only child, and go and sacrifice it. So 120 years old, first thing in the morning. You don't hem-haw about it. You don't think about it for a week or... First thing in the morning, says he saddled his ass, and he gets the wood together for this burnt offering. Because imagine, do you have 70, 80, 90, 100 pounds of firewood laying around? He gets it ready, and he takes off because his faith is being tested again. And how do we know that? Because that's what it tells us. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said to Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And so we see this. Now, you notice that and I pointed this out a little bit earlier, that it didn't actually say the land of Moriah. It doesn't actually say the mountain Moriah. In my understanding, and I'll just present this isn't dogma, but this is my understanding, that when he's moved to this area of Moriah, that he is, and this is an actual picture here, as it looks today, and we do know that this is Golgotha, and we also know that this is where Christ is sacrificed. All right, I'll let you guys read some of these notes. Now, we do know that the temple was built on Mount Moriah. But I want to get to you guys an opportunity to read some of these. Certainly it's going to come here somewhere. Nope, it did not get in here. I have no idea what happened to this slide. One of the most profound reasons that I believe that Jesus was crucified outside the city of Jerusalem on Golgotha, rather than Mount Moriah, is the fact that it actually lays outside the city walls. If you will go to Leviticus 16:27, you'll see that the sin offering was burnt outside the camp. And Hebrews 13:11 and 12 ties this in directly with Jesus' crucifixion. I have to apologize. I really had a good section of notes that I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get to. So then he's brought to this area. I believe that it's Golgotha, that he actually is going to perform the sacrifice. And we know in the story that God actually provides a lamb. So we do know that he is intimately familiar with the area of Jerusalem. We know that he's familiar with what we know as Mount Moriah. We know that he's probably familiar, and it's my supposition that he actually probably sacrificed Isaac on, or was going to sacrifice Isaac at Golgotha, because that relates a little bit better in my mind as far as for how the scripture portrays the sacrifice of Christ. He's not sacrificed on Temple Mount. He's sacrificed outside the city walls in the area known as Golgotha. Josephus confirms this, that there was a Roman, I don't even know how you would say it, area of execution that was actually right in front of Golgotha. And so we find that to be reasonably sure. Yes, Joe?
I think the real reason for Golgotha, which is also known as Calvary in Latin, and there's another one for Greek, is because of what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Actually, I think maybe 2 Samuel 17, which is the huge confrontation between the Philistines and Israel when David kills Goliath.
Okay, that's right.
They both threaten each other, and he says, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to feed you to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And David says, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to chop off your head, and I'm going to feed you and your body to the da-da-da-da-da. So the only proof back then, because they didn't have fingerprints or DNA, that you killed your worst enemy was their head.
Right.
Okay? That is a war trophy. That's the proof you took them down. So he travels from the battlefield 85 miles to Jebus. Why?
Yes.
Because the Jebusites live there.
Yes.
And my belief is this is what happened all the time. It was pro forma, that you did this. That I think he took this 2.5, 3 foot high skull and put it on a pole outside the city gates of Jerusalem. So everybody passed by, saw, ooh, David took down Goliath.
Right.
We better beware. When the flesh rotted off the bones, it was just a skull on a pole, which would be known as Golgotha, or the place of the skull.
Right.
And I did a lot of research in history to see, is this probable? Could it be supported? Because everybody tries to turn it into the rock formation. It's, oh, there's a rock face, here that looks like a face.
Right.
And I'm like, no, the historical precedence is from David and what he did with Goliath's head. It was 85 miles from the battlefield to do this.
Yeah. A couple different comments that I would have concerning that. It's really similar to what, I'm losing it for half a second here. Not Solomon, not Samuel. Jawbone and Abanas, someone help me out here. Samson, when he removes the walls of, not Gerar, but I think Ashkelon, is that right? Or Ekron? And he moves them all the way to Hebron. And that in my mind is possessing the gates of your enemies, and to reinforce what you're. And he moves them about 85 miles, and you have the same thing here, more or less. He hangs his head 85 miles, and it's pretty interesting. If you actually see a topography map of this city, you will see a couple of really interesting things. The elevation in feet, yes, Casey?
We always think of Abraham taking Isaac off into the middle of nowhere, but it's not true. As Joe said, that's where Jebus was. Jebus, the Jebusites.
Yes.
Salem, also called Salem.
Yes.
That's where, if he
Melchizedek.
was still
Melchizedek
alive,
was
that's
from.
where Melchizedek was. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think
they
it was
would
a
have been
fairly
within a couple
populated
hundred yards
region,
of
but
this.
I don't think that it was like completely inhabited. And again, this would have been a good ways outside the old city. It was actually a good ways outside the new city, roughly a mile outside the gates of the new city. So it was some out in the country, but there were some, and we don't really even know how big Jebus was at that time as far as for population. I've seen some estimates at around 2,000 people, and that would have been like in the old city of David general area was where they were. Just a couple of other things that are quite interesting. Temple Mount, the elevation of Temple Mount, at that time, before it was built up, the hill was built up, was approximately in feet 740 feet above sea level. The interesting thing about Golgotha in it today is it actually sits 777 feet above sea level, and it would have overlooked the region. It was actually the highest tower in the area, and God said, "I will bring thee to an area or into a mountain that I will show thee." And we do know that it was in the land of Moriah, but not necessarily what we know as Mount Moriah, which is where the temple stands. So just something to think about. We're just going to wrap up real quick. Genesis 22:19. So Abram returned unto his young men, and they rose and went together to Beersheba, and Abram dwelt at Beersheba. So he left Moriah, went back to Beersheba. I'm going to go back to my maps here. Yikes, going the wrong direction. Went back to Beersheba and continued there for some time. And Genesis 23, it says, and And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old, and these were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abram came to mourn for Sarah and wept for her. So at some point, and it doesn't tell us exactly when, but we know from these scriptures that he went back to Hebron, and that Sarah died at Hebron, and she's buried at Hebron in Mamre. In verse 17 of Genesis 23 rather, in the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in that field, that were all in the borders round about, were made sure, and to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of the city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, and the scriptures tell us the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And then we know in Genesis 25 that Abram gave up the ghost and died of a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered unto his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. So that will conclude the life of and the mountains of Abram. Thank you for your attention.